I'm your host, Annie Bowles, and this is News du Jour. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the News du Jour, a calmer space to consume the news, and happy freaking Friday. I am so glad it is the weekend. I'm needing it more than usual this week. I don't know about you guys. Anywho, today up first, we do have two stories about what's going on at the U.S.-Mexico border, two very tragic stories, unfortunately. And then Narcan being approved by the FDA. What is it? Why is it controversial? And why was it just recently approved? As well as a third story, Russia is detaining a Wall Street Journal reporter. And you guys, it's like Brittany Griner all over again. Let's get into the details. So I do have to issue a content warning here. This story involves graphic details. So the dangerous practice of border crossing, you guys. We have two different stories of tragedy striking people who were trying to just cross the U.S.-Mexico border, both legally and illegally. In the first situation, Mexico is investigating a fire where migrants burned to death at a detention center along the U.S.-Mexico border waiting to cross. According to information that they've gathered so far, officials did next to nothing to help the migrants escape the fire and basically left them in the building to die. 39 people burned alive inside that building. There are 4 arrest warrants being issued for people involved with the incident who did not help, according to a press conference with local authorities. But a second situation has actually happened in South Texas, where 2 undocumented migrants died by suffocation inside a shipping container, where they were found among 15 people, all of whom were struggling to breathe. The container was along Highway 90, which runs from Del Rio to San Antonio. Unfortunately, this is just another instance of the dangers of border crossing. People legitimately risking their lives for the chance at a better life for themselves as well as their children. I can't think of anything more heartbreaking. And on to our next story, let's discuss Narcan, you guys. So in a controversial move, the FDA has approved a drug called Narcan. In case you're not familiar, it's a nasal spray that basically stops an overdose in its tracks. It saves lives, no doubt, but naysayers argue that this kind of facilitates people's drug addictions by making it safer to use larger amounts of illegal drugs. Right now, with the fentanyl crisis raging, America has lost more people to drug overdoses than any time in recent memory. If you look at the graph of drug-related deaths as provided by the National Institute of Health, you'll see every kind of drug-related death slowly rising from 1999 to 2021. But around 2016, the category of synthetic opioids, aka fentanyl, it just goes vertical on the graph as those deaths begin skyrocketing. And honestly, it's kind of like a silent pandemic going on. It's happening so much more than people would like to acknowledge or are really talking about. The only place I really hear people speaking out about this is on TikTok. But a lot of other street drugs like cocaine are being spiked with fentanyl. And because it's so potent, even just a tiny bit can lead to an overdose. And it's doing so all over the country. The person may not even know that they're taking it at the time. So With this dramatic rise in overdose deaths, the FDA felt it was time to take some action to mitigate the results of this fentanyl crisis. The drug basically works by blocking the effects of opioid drugs to the brain. It can truly be the difference between life and death for drug users, who, at the end of the day, are humans too. This move will no doubt save lives, but let's just hope that it doesn't encourage further drug use. And for our final story today, Russia detains a Wall Street Journal reporter. It is like Brittany Griner all over again, you guys. The Russian authorities have their latest hostage captured. They have detained an American journalist named Evan Gershkovich, who was a correspondent for the Wall Street Journal based in Moscow. Now, in taking that assignment, Evan knew that there were risks involved. That said, he is the first American reporter to be held in Russia since the fall of the Soviet Union, according to the New York Times. So it is, a little out of the ordinary. That said, it's completely in line with Russia clamping down against freedom of press. They do that in their country every day of the year. If you remember, a bunch of Western news outlets actually pulled their correspondents out of Russia at the start of the war for this very reason. They're holding him for supposedly spying on the Russian government. Woof. The prison he's detained in is hundreds of miles outside of Moscow in the Ural Mountains. Again, woof. The Kremlin has formally endorsed this detainment. So a Kremlin spokesperson said, quote, "He was caught red-handed," end quote. Evan is now facing a 20-year sentence, and this is a country, like we talked about yesterday, where being charged is as good as being convicted. There are virtually no acquittals in Russia. The White House spoke out yesterday condemning this action and calling it, quote, "the targeting of American citizens by the Russian government." They went on to say, "We condemn the detention of Mr. Gershkovich in the strongest terms. We also condemn the Russian government's continued targeting and repression of journalists and the freedom of press. I want to strongly reiterate that Americans should heed the U.S. government's warning not to travel to Russia. U.S. citizens residing or traveling in Russia should depart immediately as the State Department continues to advise," end quote. I'm hoping that they can negotiate his release soon, but we all know it will come with a price. And that is the news du jour. Today, I wanted to leave you guys with a quote. "I hope you live a life you're proud of. And if you find that you're not, I hope you have the strength to start over." If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use to listen. A rate and review or shout out on social media would mean the world to us and help us be able to keep creating the news du jour. But the best way to support all of our work is to become a patron at www.patreon.com/sugarfreemedia. You can also follow us on social media under sugarfreemedia.co on Instagram and just sugarfreemedia, all one word, on TikTok. We appreciate you listening and look forward to telling you about the news again next time on News du Jour.
Broadcasting from Oklahoma.